Good morning, everyone. We'll just give this a couple more minutes before we really get started to allow everybody to join us. Okay. Colleagues continue to join us, but I think in the interests of getting our day started, I'd like to start rolling. I have a little bit of an echo, but I think it's okay. Um, okay, so good morning, good afternoon, I guess, depending on where you're calling in from. My name is Sarah Burch. I am a professor here at the University of Waterloo and executive director of the Waterloo Climate Institute. I'm very thrilled to be hosting you through this day and sharing our time together. So welcome to the University of Waterloo Climate Institute's first annual national forum on accelerating climate change education for the next generation of professionals at colleges and universities across Canada. This is a really unique opportunity, I think, to engage with experts, with researchers, with instructors and program specialists, and even accreditation bodies to try and unpack how we build climate change education, particularly into professional degree programs. That's our focus of our entire discussion today, which I think is quite urgently needed and timely, given that everything that's unfolding in Canada and around the world. Next slide. Before we do, I'd like to very respectfully acknowledge the land that I'm calling in from or working on today. Much of the work that occurs here at the University of Waterloo takes place on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. This main campus here is situated on the Haldeman Tract, which is land granted to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River, which is quite high on its banks the last couple of days and flooding basements in my neighborhood for sure. The active work that is really building momentum and nuance and depth here at the University of Waterloo towards reconciliation is really exciting to see in my view, and it's becoming integrated throughout our research, throughout learning and teaching, and also how we engage with the community around us. That work is coordinated by our Office of Indigenous Relations, and we at the Climate Institute, I think I can speak for the whole team, where we feel very privileged to be able to undertake this climate change education and research work on this territory. We are mindful to integrate reconciliation and collaboration with our Indigenous partners throughout this work, including the work that you'll be a part of today. So if you'd like to introduce yourselves in the chat, you can share where you're from and what your background is. This beautiful image that you see here is by the renowned late Anishinaabe artist Norval Morceau, and really brings to mind the connection between humans and more than human beings, our connection between nature and our communities. Next slide. If you are unfamiliar, the Waterloo Climate Institute is the largest university-based climate change research institute in Canada. I became its executive director in 2021, so it's been a few years now. We are the focal point for climate change research here at the University of Waterloo, and we rest outside any one faculty, so we cut across all 6 faculties, which really, I think draws our attention to and opens up opportunities for collaboration across disciplines, from the Faculty of Environment, where I am, to the Faculty of Arts and Engineering, etc. So we can see how climate research and scholarship intersects with all of those faculties. About 140 faculty members from all 6 faculties are members of the Climate Institute, and we have connections with 19 research chairs. I'm one of those. Our research strengths broadly align with three main clusters of substantive work. One is, of course, focused on deep decarbonization and sustainability transitions, so more of that climate change mitigation and transitions focus. We have an incredible strength on climate risks, resilience, and adaptation, which definitely informs the work that we're talking about today. And then scientists working on the fundamental climate science, modeling, and observation. Cutting across all of those areas, we weave together explorations of governance and equity and justice lens, and of course, being Waterloo, a focus on innovation. So this is the Climate Institute as it currently stands. We're increasingly focused on knowledge mobilization and on lifelong learning and climate change education across Canada in the public, private sectors, and beyond. Next slide. So today's forum, why you're all here. And I see many more of you have joined us, so that's excellent to see. Today's forum is part of the Accelerating Climate Education for the Next Generation of Professionals, the ACE project, being implemented by the University of Waterloo Climate Institute. The goal of the project is to accelerate the integration of particularly climate change adaptation, knowledge, and skills into professional degree programs in Canada. And we're focusing particularly on accounting, engineering, architecture, and planning. So those are the professional degree programs. I love seeing all these welcomes and these introductions coming in through the chat, by the way. These are the professional degree programs that our project is targeting. There are three major project components, and they all run concurrently. We're about a third of the way through the project. The first is a national needs assessment, which took shape as a national online survey targeting these programs, and I'll be speaking in some detail to the results of that needs assessment later this morning. The second component of this project is working to integrate climate change adaptation into our own programs here at the University of Waterloo. And supporting communities of practice, finally, is the third major pillar of this work to help accelerate this integration of climate change adaptation into our professional fields. And this forum is a major mechanism for doing that. It's our goal to build a community of practice, to connect with each other, to share what's working, to be transparent about what's not so we can learn from each other, and to share resources because we all need more of those, certainly. So these are the kind of fundamental pillars of the ACE project. Next slide. So the idea for the project was inspired by, and in fact directly funded by, Canada's National Adaptation Strategy. So you may be aware, I hope, that just in the last couple of years, the federal government supported the process of developing Canada's very first national climate change adaptation strategy. We didn't have one up until then. I played a role in that process. I was one of the co-chairs of one of the expert advisory tables. My table focused on a strong and resilient economy. So we brought together leaders from all sectors, from labor to forestry to rail to oil and gas to mining, to understand how we can collectively advance climate change adaptation, protecting communities and our economy to prepare for climate change impacts as they unfold. So a couple of key themes that I just wanted to highlight from the really, really interesting conversations that gave rise to the National Adaptation Strategy. One was that responding to climate change, protecting communities and nature and our economy is not the job of only one level of government. It's not the responsibility simply of the federal government. It's a shared responsibility across all sectors, all level of government, and also across, scientific institutions, research organizations, et cetera. So I thought that was really important for the actual doing of adaptation and kind of informs what we're trying to do here today. The next is that emergency management, sort of dealing with crises, extreme weather events, floods, fires, or whatever, as they unfold is not the only dimension of climate change adaptation. We need much more futures thinking, proactive planning, public engagement, inclusivity, this kind of thing. And so we need different skills to do that sort of systems thinking and futures thinking to proactively adapt to climate change. And that feeds into one specific recommendation from the National Adaptation Strategy, which was that there is a desperate need for climate literate and skilled professionals. And our proposal to Natural Resources Canada responded directly to that call. These professions, as we've captured here today, are on the front lines of climate change. They design our critical infrastructure, they shape our communities, and they deeply influence the preparedness of our economy. So we took that to heart in the proposal for the ACE project, and that's what we're working to enhance. Next slide, please. So this project is funded through a generous grant from Natural Resources Canada, the Climate Change Adaptation Program, which exists to support the implementation of the NAS. The work is made possible thanks to the enthusiasm of our key project partners on campus. This has been such a collaborative effort that I've really been privileged to be a part of, which is the School of Accounting and Finance, the School of Architecture, the Departments of Civil and Environmental Engineering and Systems Design Engineering, and our School of Planning. We're also very, very grateful to our external advisory committee members, Engineers Canada, the Canadian Architectural Certification Board, Canadian Institution of Planners, CPA Canada, and the Canadian Society of Landscape Architecture for their ongoing support and guidance. And I do want to acknowledge, of course, that behind the scenes here, making this whole thing an incredible team effort is the Climate Institute team. Of course, you will probably see the face of Dr. Michelle Martin, who's been really central to launching the survey, designing this whole proposal and project, and leading it really. Simon Glauser, Darren Wines, Eleanor Waslander, who's moved on to a new role, Natalie Smith, and so many others. So this whole day, and of course the work that preceded it, is a team effort. So thank you all for that. Okay, moving on to the next slide, please, for our objectives. So we have 3 core objectives for our time today in this national forum. We are aiming to support and promote the acceleration of climate change education into professional degree programs, but also to share the results of the study that we recently completed on climate change education, and to provide a forum for you all to connect, to share your experiences, to explore future opportunities for us all to collaborate. So those are the 3 main goals as we see them as we go along. We'll just keep those in mind. How are we doing on time? Doing great on time. Okay. So the next slide, we have a very full agenda for the day. We recognize that folks are coming in from different time zones. I apologize to those out west who are up bright and early, but I really appreciate you being here. So we've sprinkled breaks throughout the day, even though those may not align with your meal times, but hopefully you can get up and stretch and drink some water, stay hydrated. You can pick and choose how you want to go through the program. We start here, of course, with our opening session and our guests, Elder Myeengun Henry and our keynote speaker, Elizabeth Gamble. Very honored to have them both here with us today. Then we take a very quick break and we'll have another session with me where I present the overall results of our survey, some key insights and takeaways. We will have a little bit of an opportunity at the end there for a Q&A. Both with me and with Dr. Michelle Martin. So that will be followed by separate and concurrent Zoom meetings for folks to focus on climate change in each of our 4 disciplines: accounting, engineering, architecture, and planning. So you can move into the discipline that most aligns with your own work and interests following our survey presentation. After that, you're invited to a session where you can cut across disciplines and learn something about the challenges or the opportunities that others are facing and share what you know. Then we bring everyone together for a panel discussion that I'll moderate, where 4 universities tell us how they're tackling the task of integrating climate change education into programs. So we'll get kind of on the ground firsthand insights into how that's going and what's working. So then we'll wrap up the day around 3:30 to 4 o'clock Ontario time here with some final thoughts on our forum, some next steps for this community of practice, and for each discipline and for students. So that is what we hope to achieve through the day, and hopefully it will all come off seamlessly. I'm sure it will. A couple of housekeeping notes as we go. The full day, of course, is from 10:30 a.m. Ontario time to around 4 p.m. The Zoom event platform lobby, through which you arrived here, is the place to find the program for the day and the Zoom links for any sessions you'd like to attend. So at the end of this morning session, for instance, this one will close down, and back in the lobby, you can enter the next session. Okay, so, and I think the chat has been added there or the link rather has added in the chat. This session and my presentation of the survey results and the panel session later today are being live translated. So if you prefer to listen in French, you can use the interpretation function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. There's also an option to turn on closed captioning for accessibility if you choose to. Each of the forum sessions has a documents tab on your Zoom screen. We'll be using that function to add some resources that might be of interest to you, including, of course, the report on our national survey results. After our keynote speaker, Elizabeth Gamble, as well as after my presentation of survey results and later on today, we will have brief opportunities for questions and answers. So I would suggest, please, that you use the Q&A function on Zoom at the bottom of your Zoom screen rather than the chat for the Q&A, so that our team on the back end can curate those questions and make sure that we catch them all and respond to them as we can. Okay. And so now we will move on to some opening remarks. I'm very thrilled and honored, as always, to welcome Dr. Elder Myeengun Henry. As Indigenous Knowledge Keeper, Elder Henry provides strategic leadership to the University of Waterloo's Faculty of Health and our response to the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. He collaborates with the Office of Indigenous Relations and with the Faculty of Health community and identifies and contributes to building reciprocal and respectful relationships with Indigenous individuals and communities. And in my experience, always, it's such a pleasure to listen to Elder Henry draw out really key insights and themes that we can take with us through the day and just be mindful of as we work to build this community. So enough of me for the moment. Myeengun, I'd love to pass it to you. Thank you.
Miigwech, Sarah. Appreciate that. Bujo Myeengun Indejnikas, Deshkan Zibiendo and Jiba, Myeengendodem, Ani, Sego, Danse. Thought I'd share a couple of words in some of our local languages here that reflect a welcome experience for everyone. My background carries a long history of learning and sharing, but today was a little bit more special. When I thought about our gathering today, this morning I got up quite early and started thinking about things that are happening around the world, and there was a moment where my grandfather came to visit me. My grandfather was a very spiritual person. He went through the years of residential schools that wasn't very pleasant, but he had some challenges with poverty and there were some addiction issues that was happening throughout his life based on the life that he had to live during those times. But when he was getting a little older, he really found something that launched his the rest of his life. It was I think our creator speaking to him at that time, that his upbringing was very special. He was able to communicate with this this place we call Mother Earth, and as he did as a youngster, it left a lingering inspiration within him to pass knowledge on to future generations about how we can live together on this planet in even more respectful ways than we've seen recently here in this world. And now that he spoke to me once again, I want to bring that message over to you, because that's exactly what our elders always talked about, those original teachings that come from the beginning of time. And when we think about what our responsibilities are, it's very easy to see that the earth is still doing what it was supposed to do by their original instructions. We've seen the sun come up this morning. And during that moment, there was a transition. While everybody was sleeping, our beautiful grandmother, Moon, she looked over and watched us just like a grandmother would, to her grandchildren. She would make sure they're safe. She would give them food. If they were disturbed over the night, she would comfort them, put a warmer blanket on them, maybe give them some water, anything that she would do to make comfort for her grandchildren. And our grandmother Moon did exactly that last night for all of us. And then there was a reflection that was coming across the horizon, a little glimmer of light that was starting to find its way through. And she knew at that moment that she will transition her responsibility over to who we now know as Father Sun. And Father Sun made his appearance bright and strong, sent the light so that we can have energy from that beautiful sunlight that we see, but also the light so that we can do our chores during the day. Also, giving us that chance to know that the elements around us care for us in every given way. And so, as I heard my grandfather speak, he talked about how can we acknowledge what this real life looks like outside of what we're seeing in the devastation, the climate issues that we're faced today with the wars, the political upheavals that we're looking, and that can control us. And that was kind of like the message my grandfather was saying during his time of addiction and poverty. His mind wouldn't go to the points that made him heal. And when he found that, it ended up being the earth that we live on, the fish that made his body more healthy, the plants that grew that made his body and mind stronger. And I think that's the message that he was trying to relay is no matter what's happening in this world today, it's that Mother Earth that will find its passageway to us for better healing. And I think Indigenous people around the world all share that same message that we need to keep this earth healthy as possible because what we leave as a legacy will be something that our children will have to at least enjoy or deal with the struggles that we've made. So if we love our grandchildren and great grandchildren, I think today in our heart, through the message of my grandfather, let's work together to make this planet a better place to live, a stronger and healthier Mother Earth with our assistance can make this world so much better. And I think we would see less poverty. We would see less challenges that we're facing today because people will have the nourishment that they're looking for. When our spirit, mind, and body get separated, we got to return to the earth to recall those original teachings and instructions. So just by looking at the sun and the moon this morning, I was reminded of something very beautiful. And I hope that that message comes across today, as you're going through the presentations and building this knowledge base so we can have a great place for our children to live in the future. But let's take that challenge too to say that if we're doing something that we know might be a little um, uncomfortable, then maybe it's that prompt to help us all thrive together in unity to make this world a better place. And I think that's exactly what I want to do today. Make this moment special to spend time with you to learn, share, and to grow as the people on this earth who are in full need of all the other elements or spirits on this earth, the water, the air, the plants. And in fact, we even came in that order. We knew that the plants were here, the rocks, the plants, the animals, and the humans came last. We are so dedicated and needing of their assistance, but they don't need us as much as we need them. So let's make sure that we um, act responsible and allow ourselves to feel this strength that this beautiful world still has for us. So let's have a great day. Let's build knowledge and friendships and walk on this earth for the time that we have in the good way that we can. With that said, miigwech for allowing me to spend some moments with you this morning. I want to thank my grandfather, especially who is I just feel that his wisdom is such a beautiful thing that all can share with. So with that, we would say Mama P. There's no word for goodbye in our language, but we say we'll see you again, and have a great day, everybody. Miigwech.
Thank you so much, Elder Henry. I really appreciate that. And thank you to your grandfather as well. I appreciate the what I'm taking away from what you said, I guess, and what I hope we kind of all keep in mind is what responsibility we bear, given what we know to be true, and the urgency, I guess, behind doing this work. Many of us are doing it for our children and our grandchildren, and that reminder is very motivating. And likewise, what it means to be healthy. I think, thinking about our relationship with nature very carefully and holding up our end of the bargain, being present in that relationship. And we have a real opportunity to do that together today. So I really appreciate those words. Thank you. Next, I'd like to welcome our keynote speaker, Elizabeth Gamble, president of the Globe Series. Elizabeth is a recognized sustainability, energy, and clean tech leader who spent the last 20 or more years pursuing yes and solutions to our toughest societal challenges. As president of Globe Series, she leads a passionate team that designs and delivers events with the primary aim of accelerating a clean and inclusive economy. So, Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Burch, to the Waterloo Climate Institute, the university for inviting me this morning. And of course, more importantly, for the amazing work that you're doing to advance climate education and solutions. So maybe we can, as I get started here, we can bring my slides up, which I'll try to use as complementary tools, not speak to them. Again, my name is Elizabeth Gamble, and until recently, I was actually Elizabeth Shirt, making my initials ESG, which feels pretty fitting for someone who has spent their career working in the sustainability space. And so, of course, many of you will be familiar, but some of you may not know that ESG is a pretty important acronym for those of us doing this work across environmental, social, and governance opportunities in business, in finance, and more. I want to say, miigwech, thank you so much to Elder Henry for starting us off in a really good way this morning. And maybe you can move to the next slide, Natalie, as I thank Elder Henry for sharing some of your family's journey and experience, for sharing teachings from your grandfather, for reminding us the order in which things came, that the water, the plants, and the animals came first. For sharing how we can be in relationship with Mother Earth and how that relationship can actually be a source of healing for us, which means, Dr. Burch, as you said, we have a responsibility and an accountability to that healing. And when we do that, we can all be nourished physically and mentally. So I do want to begin by acknowledging I am extremely fortunate to live, work, and play, usually on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations, so also known as Vancouver. However, today, this morning, I'm joining you from the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, and of course, land that's covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit, also known as Toronto. As Dr. Burch mentioned, I have the privilege of leading the team at Globe. We're a Canadian-owned and operated business with a 30-year history designing events to create a more resilient, competitive, and clean economy. And my job at Globe, and really the focus of my whole career, has been about bringing people together to build relationships, to foster connections, and to advance solutions that can result, yes, in a stronger economy, and in resilient communities and a healthier planet. And so the words that you see on the screen now were shared by Councillor Wilson Williams of the Squamish Nation at one of our recent Globe events. When I have the chance to speak to a wonderful group like this, or when Globe brings people together, just as the fantastic organizers of this event have done, I try to anchor myself in these words as a reminder of how I can be part of advancing truth and reconciliation on a daily basis. It starts with conversations and connections. It starts with having an open mind and considering what we can do to create a better future for this generation, yes, and for the generations that follow. So maybe we could move to the next slide, Natalie, and I'll just share a little bit more about Globe and the group that we're part of. So we're part of a group of organizations called Profoundry, which is a collective of sustainability and climate experts who are helping create value, manage risk, and showcase that in Canada, clean is competitive. So within that group, our partners include Delphi, which is a strategic sustainability consultancy, which, like Globe, has been around for over 3 decades, as well as Canadian Business for Social Responsibility, or CBSR. This is a corporate member-based association bringing together Canadian corporations who are looking to embed sustainability and social responsibility in their business practices, and Leading Change, which is a movement of young leaders and sustainability professionals. And I tell you this not as a commercial, although I do think we're pretty great, but rather because it means at Profoundry, we have access to a really diverse group of unique perspectives, from business and finance to academia and innovation to elected officials, governments of all types, youth, civil society, you name it. And so this access provides us a unique window into how the world is changing physically, financially, politically, into some of the unique and complex challenges we face, and into the unique opportunities that we have here in Canada to advance skill sets and solutions that are going to allow us not just to survive, really to thrive in the face of uncertainty. Myself, I've spent a career bringing people together to try to uncover those solutions to some of our society's toughest challenges. And so I don't actually consider myself an expert in any one area of sustainability or otherwise. Like so many of you joining are experts in your fields. I'm pretty much a mile wide and an inch deep on a whole bunch of topics and issues. But that role gives me the opportunity to hear from and interact with and learn from leaders and change makers from across Canada's economy. And so my hope this morning is that I can help set the stage for this wonderful day of programming you have ahead. I can help set the context for some of the challenges we're facing, and I can help seed some of the opportunities for the important role that our education sectors can play in advancing climate adaptation and resilient solutions. So moving to the next slide, let's start with some level setting in terms of how climate change is affecting Canadians and our economy. I think by now we are all acutely aware of the increasing impacts of a changing climate that we're feeling here in Canada and around the world. So my good friends at the Insurance Bureau of Canada have done a great job of summarizing some of the regional impacts of those events on the slide you see here. 2024, this last year, was characterized by severe weather events like we have never experienced before. Record-breaking heat waves, which set the stage for devastating wildfires, destructive winds, relentless rainfalls, which led to landslides and flooding. All of which, as you can see on the slide, have significant impacts on our infrastructure, on our businesses, on our homes, and of course, on our lives. So what do these impacts look like? We'll see on the next slide that in July and August alone last year, about 250,000 Canadians suffered financial losses from just four major catastrophic weather events that caused about 7 billion in insured losses. Over the course of 2024 in its entirety, insurers paid out over 8.5 billion in severe weather claims. In the last decade, property and casualty insurers have paid out over 30 billion in claims for these types of events. And again, this is focusing a lot just on the insurance payments, not the total value of damage incurred, which would include what's uninsured, because of course these impacts go well beyond just insurance claims. We've seen and heard heartbreaking stories of homes and businesses lost, financial hardship experienced by individuals, families, and businesses. In the last decade, over 880,000 Canadians, 87,000 businesses have suffered financial losses because of the damage caused by severe weather and natural catastrophes. Events in 2024 alone likely cost Canadian homeowners, business owners, and their governments almost 20 billion overall. So that's insured and uninsured damage costs combined. And of course, Canadian households have to pay deductibles. They shoulder non-insured losses, while governments absorb impacts to infrastructure and have to rely on taxpayers to fund disaster assistance. And this, of course, is just the quantifiable impacts. There are so many other costs to society that are much harder to quantify. Access to basic services like water, power, sewage, transportation cut off. Disruptions to supply chains, cutting off businesses and families from needed food, resources, and household goods. Impacts to our emergency responders and their families, who are now much more often called to the front lines. And of course, impacts on marginalized and underrepresented groups who proportionally experience these impacts much more significantly than privileged individuals like me. And of course, in extreme cases and in increasing cases, loss of life. So what does this mean for society? Well, practically and at its surface, it means increasing risk that needs to be mitigated. This is one lens that we can assess a changing climate, and it's a lens that a lot of organizations are taking initially. But I want to zoom out a bit and consider what it means by also thinking about two other major shifts we've experienced in modern society. The Industrial Revolution, which spanned the late 18th and early 19th centuries, and of course transformed economies from agrarian based to industrial and manufacturing. And the Digital Revolution, which happened in the late 20th century, characterized by the rise of computers, the internet, and information technology. And if you're an elder millennial or younger Gen X like me, you lived through all of that. I would argue now that we are facing two simultaneous and intersecting revolutions. An AI revolution where machine learning models are reshaping industries, creating new opportunities, and of course, challenging the way we approach problems, including climate change. And a climate revolution, which requires a transition to net zero economy and adapting to the increased threat of extreme weather and other impacts. So what do these revolutions have in common? Well, they required and require massive changes in skills. There are huge and exciting ranges of new skills needed in the climate revolution, related both to mitigation, adaptation, and new opportunities. For the purposes of this discussion, I'll focus on skills to adapt and really build resilience to climate change. And of course, we can't be blind to the geopolitical and economic uncertainty and complexity here right now in North America and around the world, which I appreciate can feel like we are constantly living in crisis mode. However, somewhere along the way, someone coined the phrase, never waste a good crisis. And in this case, both climate and geopolitical crises do present a unique opportunity to lean into spaces that will drive Canadian competitiveness, jobs, and skills opportunities, all while enabling that cleaner economy. But first, let's level set again. Briefly, let's look at the scope of climate adaptation. So looking at the next slide, once again, my good friends at IBC have provided this great summary of three general types of adaptation required to reduce our vulnerability to the impacts of extreme weather events. What this shows us that is in order to mitigate for the risks inherent in a changing climate, we need to adapt across sectors of the economy. And this presents opportunity. We see opportunities in physical infrastructure, including our built environment, cities and communities, transportation systems, electrical grid, and beyond. In natural systems, our forests, our lakes, our wetlands, our parks, as well as their connection to our natural resource economies like agriculture and forestry. And of course, in the softer but equally important industries and sectors, including finance, accounting, legal, and policy. So what does this mean for us? Well, looking at the next slide, and here in Canada, as Dr. Burch mentioned, the federal government's National Adaptation Strategy lays out a framework to reduce the risk of climate-related disasters, improve health outcomes, protect nature and biodiversity, build and maintain resilient infrastructure, and support a strong economy and workers. We were thrilled at Globe to provide a number of spaces to help advance the strategy, both before and after its launch, by hosting ministerial and multi-stakeholder workshops at our events and working with partners like the Insurance Bureau of Canada. Now, happily, the plan acknowledges that we need to grow adaptation knowledge and skills and has specific objectives and targets in that. And so, in fact, as Dr. Burch mentioned, in its objectives, we state Canada should have a skilled, diverse, and adaptable workforce supported by education, training, knowledge, and skills development to respond to future impacts of climate change, including with Indigenous and Northern communities. And again, Dr. Burch noted has direct targets related to growing those skills. By 2027, 70% of members of relevant professional associations should have that capacity. And just adding to that, also by 2027, 80% of highly exposed businesses need to include adaptation to climate change in their plans and strategies in order to strengthen their competitiveness. And I would argue and expect that those plans and strategies would include finding the smart people to execute on those plans and strategies. So maybe, Natalie, we could stop sharing for a minute because I'm going to do a little bit more storytelling, because the good news is, of course, the government has recognized the importance of supporting and building those skills required to tackle this challenge, to mitigate the risk, and to turn it into an opportunity. And of course, we are in a bit of a holding pattern at this moment when it comes to advancement of federal policies and programs. And that does not mean we have to sit and wait. There are incredible opportunities to help foster those skill sets within the very areas of the economy that you are championing and advancing every day. Many of these skill sets and roles have traditionally been involved in climate change mitigation, and they're ideally placed to take on adaptation responsibilities and to help build a more resilient Canadian economy. So I want to start with a story of a colleague working at Delphi, an amazing young leader who studied civil engineering at a different Ontario post-secondary institution than our hosts. She shared with me just yesterday but one of her favorite projects she's been involved with since she joined us at Delphi has been working with a major company in the telecommunications sector to assess risk to its assets from a changing climate and extreme weather events. And she also shared that while her program had an emphasis on sustainability broadly, it did not include much on climate risk and adaptation. And so she's had to do lots of on-the-ground learning. Of course, we are thrilled to provide that opportunity for this young leader. And imagine the leg up our next generation of students could have graduating from their programs with a strong grounding in this kind of work. So civil engineering, civil and environmental engineering, a great example of a space where having an understanding of climate risk and impact is increasingly a central part of doing business. We heard real examples of this at Globe's recent Toronto event, Globe Exchange, from across businesses and industries. As is the case in the telecom industry, designing and building infrastructure that can withstand extreme weather events came up time and time again. So in a session focused on building resilience in a changing climate, we heard leaders from AECOM, a major Canadian infrastructure firm, alongside cooperators, a major insurer, speaking to the need to design and build infrastructure to reduce the impact of disasters in the long term. So a real example brought up in that dialogue, stormwater drains, no longer equipped to withstand the flooding events we're experiencing. We identified in that session a real need for communities to retrofit existing drainage systems and explore new solutions like permeable surfaces to absorb more rainwater. And an even more fundamental challenge named here is the need to regularly update flood maps. About 75% of this mapping is severely out of date. So a couple of great examples where challenge could be turned to opportunity with the right skills and education. Architecture, another great example of an industry and career space that has a great potential to focus on climate resilience and adaptation. We need to design and create structures that can actively respond to environmental changes like extreme weather, like using smart materials, dynamic facades, predictive systems. And we need to look at incorporating sustainable principles like designing with low carbon materials and considering the use of building materials that actually work as carbon sinks, like mass timber or tall wood structures. You can check out Canadian organization FP Innovations for more on that mass timber and tall wood opportunity. There's also really cool solutions where CO2 is an input to making cement and concrete. You can check out Canadian company Carbon Cure to learn more about that. A couple of years ago, Globe partnered with Corporate Knights on an initiative called Breakthrough Solutions Inspired by Buildings. And that initiative shone a light on the magnitude of this challenge, but also opportunity. 15 million dwellings in Canada, including 10 million single-family homes and 5 million apartments with a combined floor area of 2.1 billion square meters. And there are another 750 million square meters of commercial and institutional buildings in Canada. So if we look at just the opportunity to scale up Canada's renovation industry alone to retrofit this existing building stock, never mind new construction, it's a massive opportunity for job creation and providing skills to create better, more climate resilient homes and workplaces. And major Canadian and global industry players agreed. Our partners on that initiative included companies like Chandos Construction, Ivanhoe Cambridge, and Schneider Electric. Landscape architecture is another space that's growing. Opportunities to incorporate natural systems like wetlands for flood control or green roofs for temperature regulation, or that capture and store carbon like urban forests and soil management practices. We can restore degraded ecosystems to enhance biodiversity and build resilience against climate impacts, and implement water management strategies like rain gardens, permeable pavements, and water recycling systems. At our recent Globe Exchange event, we were thrilled to partner with one of Canada's leading science-based conservation organizations, Ducks Unlimited, pardon me, on programming focused on the opportunity to understand and measure the value of nature, the impacts of biodiversity loss, and the effectiveness of nature-based solutions on building climate resilience. And of course, at Ducks, they utilize landscape architecture expertise along with other disciplines to deliver on their mission to conserve, restore, and manage wetlands that, yes, are home to ducks, but also how we can incorporate those spaces into natural habitats, into working landscapes. No slides right at this minute. I just wanted to do a bit of storytelling. We'll come back to some visuals. Accounting and finance is another space. Opportunities to prepare and analyze sustainability data. Oh, not quite yet, Natalie. Thank you, though. Opportunities to prepare and analyze sustainability data, identify and quantify financial risks, understand carbon credit markets and other financial instruments instruments, sustainable procurement opportunities. And at Globe Exchange, we heard from numerous financial institutions and organizations in that industry, from Canada and around the world, talking about that incredible importance of understanding and assessing risk from the point of view of the financial sector. So this included major insurers like cooperators who are on the front lines of impacts. It includes major pension funds like University Pension Fund, who need to understand the risks and opportunities of a changing climate to their investment portfolios. It included Canadian headquartered banks like TD, who need to understand the risks and opportunities for their clients, and global asset managers like BNP Paribas, who are shaping major aspects of their investment decisions around climate risk and clean economy opportunities. And of course, organizations like CPA Canada, one of your program partners, who are playing a critical role in advancing tools and frameworks related to climate reporting, measurement, and risk. And of course, the needs don't end with the financial sector specifically, as the need to understand climate risk from a financial and accounting standpoint increases, not just here in Canada, but globally. Organizations of all shapes and sizes, public and private, large and small, will need skills and capacity in accounting and finance to help them respond to those needs. Urban planning is another space we addressed at Globe Exchange, opportunities to incorporate green infrastructure like urban forests, and think about how we design our cities and how we respond to the needs of our communities. At Globe Exchange, we heard from the City of Calgary on its food resiliency plan, designed to ensure it has systems and infrastructure to provide secure sources of food to its community. That includes their Growing Spaces Urban Agriculture Program, which supports and expands locally grown food by connecting growers to vacant city-owned land through community partnerships. And at Globe Forum 24 in Vancouver, we heard from an organization championing mini forests or micro forests or tiny forests, communities of native trees and shrubs planted tightly together in urban or suburban sites. Systems engineering is the last spot I want to touch on and just tell a bit of story, in that we have an incredible opportunity to prioritize design around energy efficiency, renewable energy, and low carbon technologies. And we need to understand and mitigate risks from extreme weather events, rising sea levels, and resource scarcity, excuse me. In the electricity industry, I recently spoke to a major Canadian transmission and distribution company. And of course, in that sector, they are laser focused on reliably and safely providing power to millions of Canadians. Keeping the lights on is a societal imperative. And for the first time, extreme weather events are causing them to consider full shutdowns of aspects of that transmission infrastructure in order to protect against further disasters if a major storm is coming, and more importantly, if a forest fire or a fire is advancing. So, in short, we have a major opportunity to reimagine roles to adapt to our climate impact in our climate impacted future. And so, Natalie, you can bring up the slides, and probably we'll see where you are. Go to the next slide. And it's really never been more needed. The uncertainty and polarization we're faced with today, south of the border, here at home, and around the world, needs bold leadership, and it needs action. And of course, universities and academic institutions can play a critical role by adapting their curricula to equip students with knowledge and skills needed to tackle climate change and build a more resilient society. And importantly, climate adaptation skills tap directly into academia's superpowers. And so looking at the next slide, Natalie, firstly, we need to take a long view. We know all too well that politicians and CEOs are often incentivized to act for short-term benefits. We're seeing that play out as we speak. Due to the politicization of climate change south of the border, there's been a cooling effect, not the good kind, in the US, at least in the short term. We've also seen some pushback here when it comes to federal and provincial carbon taxes, for example. Fortunately, academia generally takes a longer term view, and despite current setbacks, has the opportunity to plant the seeds for future solutions and actions. Secondly, We need a systems approach. Climate change is considered a systems level problem because it involves natural, economic, political, and social systems. Addressing climate change involves multiple sectors, from energy and transportation to agriculture and urban development. Tackling something this complex doesn't just require new skills, it requires a systems level approach. It requires us to think differently, and that is your sweet spot. Universities have so often brought together experts from multiple fields, scientists, economists, engineers, and social theorists to develop those holistic solutions to global problems like poverty and public health issues. And you can do the same for climate change. Integrating climate change topics across disciplines, taking that interdisciplinary approach will ensure students understand the multifaceted nature of the issue and encourage collaborative, co-created solutions. And of course, there's an opportunity to partner with other organizations like the Climate Risk Institute, who I think I've seen on the call today, which will enable you to learn from those already in the field and inform programming. Thirdly, and maybe most importantly, you are a source of inspiration. Gen Z has grown up with the reality of climate change, with Greta Thunberg as their spokesperson. They are galvanized to act. Universities have been inspiring young minds for as long as you've existed. You have always been the ones to empower generations of thinkers, leaders, and change makers with the knowledge and tools they need to make a difference. We need you more now than ever to help us turn out the next generation of problem solvers and thinkers who will help us not only survive in the face of climate change, but thrive. So to wrap up on my last slide, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to join you today. I hope that I've helped to set the stage and context in a good way. Please reach out anytime. I would be thrilled to connect with all of you. My email address here, and I will turn it back to Dr. Burch and the team.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. That was great and so targeted. I so appreciate that, to the different disciplines that we have in the room today and the work that we're doing with this project. In the couple of minutes that remain to us, and I encourage others to ask questions as well. You can also follow up with us after and ask questions that we can perhaps pass along to Elizabeth, if I can presume, following the session. But I really appreciated your highlighting that longer term view. Coincidentally, I was just in a really interesting conversation with a major insurance company yesterday, and they were saying, we were talking about climate change and adaptation, and they were saying they really struggle with their 1-year business cycle and then their 3 to 5 year strategic planning cycle, and that's it. That's the outside bounds of their sort of futures thinking. And we sort of view that kind of capacity to think about the future, plan over longer timeframes, as one of those really important skills that isn't often kind of brought to the forefront. So I just wonder, have you seen an appetite for that in the sort of private, nonprofit, or public sector groups that you're talking to? Have you seen that? What does it look like in practice to do that well, to think about the future in a tangible, useful, strategic way?
Yeah, Sarah, it's such a great question, and it's one actually I also was just recently asked at another event focused on purpose, where we were talking about how do you take that longer view to purpose, and even for Globe and our group of organizations, we're small businesses, and I'm sure in academia you can appreciate even our own planning cycles. We talk about taking a long view where we're planning for 20, 50, 100 years ahead. And yet, even in our own businesses, it can be challenging, especially in the current context of political and economic uncertainty, to plan, beyond six months, 12 months, 18, 24. The word of the day or of the hour, the moment for me, especially in the current context, has been pragmatism. And I love that word because to me, it doesn't mean only focusing on the here and now. It does mean meeting the moment. And so when we think about the uncertainty we're faced with, It does mean balancing what can we do today, what are the near-term opportunities from a competitiveness standpoint that we can address. And so some of the industries and sectors and spaces I've named as opportunities to grow skills, a lot of those are in the stages of assessment, right? It's actually about, well, we got to understand the risk that we're faced with before we can even plan what it looks like to mitigate and address. And so I think when we're faced with that, with some of that uncertainty, we can have visions and we can have longer term strategies and threshold that focus on reaching those long-term goals. And we need that. We need the hope and the optimism that comes with that, number one, with having that vision. And we need to have that common vision of the future. And in fact, a lot of times when we're in especially polarizing times like now, starting first with what is that long-term vision can actually be the thing that anchors us in finding common ground. And so when we start with anchoring in that vision, not necessarily getting it perfect, but anchoring in a shared vision of the future, then we can start to think about, okay, in the here and now, in the next 6 to 12 months, which is the planning cycle I'm living and breathing, especially with geopolitical and economic uncertainty. What are the things that I could do today that align with achieving that longer term vision? It's not perfect. It's not fast enough for lots of us, but it is incremental progress, and it continues to look like progress when we're faced with challenging times in terms of investment planning and strategic planning.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And what you're describing to me sounds like backcasting instead of forecasting, right? So we start with that vision.
100% backcasting. Yeah.
Yeah, so that we know exactly what to do today. It's not some fuzzy thing exercise. It's actually deeply, it informs our immediate next steps, but making sure those align with that deeper vision. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I have a lot to mull over and to take away into our sessions for the rest of the day. So I so appreciate that. Thank you all for your attention. So we're going to draw our first kickoff morning event here to a close. We now have a 15-minute break. So we will rejoin at our next session, during which I'm excited to present the results of our needs assessment, our national survey, at 11:45 sharp, whatever that means in your time zone, but that will be 11:45 in Ontario. So thank you all for your attention, and we'll see you soon in the next. And thank you, Elizabeth, so much for a fantastic talk.